Students, welcome to Sunil's tutorial. I'm Sunil Mirwani and today we'll be doing this chapter called as nervous coordination. Let's see peripheral nervous system. Let us see what we understand by peripheral nervous system. Now, peripheral nervous system is composed of nerve fibers arising from the brain and spinal cord. It is composed. It is composed of only the nerve fibers arising from brain and spinal cord. So the nerve fibers arising from brain and spinal cord give rise to peripheral nervous system. The nerve fibers arising from the brain are called as cranial nerves, while those arising from the spinal cord are called as spinal nerves. Nerves arising from brain are called cranial nerves. Nerves arising from spinal cord are called spinal nerves. Right? So you can have cranial nerves and spinal nerves. Now let us see which are the cranial nerves. Right? There are 12 pairs of cranial nerves arising from the brain. There are 12 pairs of cranial nerves arising from the brain. Right? Now, these are the first, second and the eighth cranial nerves are sensory. First, second and eighth cranial nerves are sensory, right? Whereas the third, fourth, sixth, 11th and 12th, the third, fourth, sixth, 11th and 12th are motor. Cranial nerves are motor, right? The 5th, 7th, 9th and 10th are mixed. The 5th, 7th, 9th and 10th cranial nerves are of mixed type. Cranial nerves are of mixed type. Fine. Now, the mixed type cranial nerves. Let's see what do you mean by mixed type cranial nerves. Mixed type cranial nerves. Amongst mixed type cranial nerves, what do you understand by these? These are composed of both sensory as well as motor nerves and are bound to connective tissue sheath. They are composed of both sensory and motor. They are composed of both sensory and motor nerves bound in a connective tissue sheath. Bound in a connective tissue sheath. Fine. They carry information both the ways. They carry information both ways. Fine. They are classified as trigeminal, facial, glossopharyngeal, glossopharyngeal and vagus. Cranial nerves. So these are the 4 different types of mixed cranial nerves. Right? Now, let's see the names of the different cranial nerves. What are their types and which are their receiving organs? Let's see all the 12 cranial nerves. Name of cranial nerve. What type is it and what is its receiving organ? I'm going to now show you all the 12 cranial nerves. The first is called as olfactory. Right? This is a sensory cranial nerve. The receiving organ of this is nose. The second is optic. Again, this is also a sensory cranial nerve. The receiving organ for this is the retina of the eye. Right? So impulses are received from the nose, impulses are received from the retina of the eye. Impulses are received from the nose by the olfactory cranial nerves. Impulses are received from the retina of the eye from the optic cranial nerve. Then you have the oculomotor cranial nerve. The oculomotor cranial nerve, as the name suggests, is a motor cranial nerve. It is connected to the eye muscle. So your movement of the eye muscle is with the oculomotor cranial nerve. Then you have the trochlear. The trochlear cranial nerve, again this is a motor cranial nerve. It is again connected to the eye muscle. Right? Then you have the trigeminal. This is a mixed, as I already told you that this is a mixed type of cranial nerve. The trigeminal is connected to the skin, head and the face. Skin, head, face. Right? Then you have the abduction. The abductions are motor cranial nerves which are connected to the eye muscle. Right? Then you have the facial cranial nerves. These are mixed cranial nerves and they are connected to the taste buds and the salivary glands. Taste buds and salivary glands. Right? The next is auditory cranial nerve. This is auditory is a sensory cranial nerve. It is connected to the internal ear. Then you have the glossopharyngeal. It's a mixed type of cranial nerve. It is connected to the tongue and pharynx. Then you have the vagus. Now the vagus, you should know, is the longest cranial nerve. It is a mixed cranial nerve. It is connected to the heart and the lungs. So your heart and lung impulses are transmitted through the vagus cranial nerve. Then you have the accessory cranial nerve. Which is a motor cranial nerve. It is connected to the neck and shoulder. Right? And the last cranial nerve that you have is the hypoglossal. Which is again a motor nerve which is connected to the tongue muscle. So these are the different types of cranial nerves and types of cranial nerves, the receiving organs and their names. Next, let's move on to spinal nerves now. Let's consider spinal nerves. Right? There are 31 pairs of spinal nerves. Like there we had, in this case there were 12 pairs of cranial nerves. Here there are 31 pairs of spinal nerves. There are 31 pairs of spinal nerves. Right? All the spinal nerves are of mixed type. All spinal nerves are of mixed type. Fine. Now, which are the different types of spinal nerves? You have the cervical spinal nerve. Spinal nerves are A. First you have the cervical spinal nerves. You have 8 pairs of cervical spinal nerves. Then you have the lumbar spinal nerves. You have 5 pairs of lumbar spinal nerves. Then you have the thoracic spinal nerve. There are 12 pairs of thoracic spinal nerves. Then you have the sacral spinal nerve. You have 5 pairs of the sacral spinal nerve. And finally you have the coccygeal spinal nerve, which is only one pair. Only one pair of the coccygeal spinal nerve. So these are the different types of spinal nerves. Okay. Next, what do we understand by receptors? What are receptors? The receptors are sensory cells that receive the stimulus from outside. They are sensory cells that receive stimulus from outside. Right? Once they receive the stimulus, the sense all your sense organs form your receptors. That is, your sense organs such as skin, tongue, eyes, ears, nose are your gateway for receptors. They are made up of sensory cells. Your sense organs are made up of sensory cells called as receptors. So receptors are sensory cells. Now each of the sensory cell has a sensory nerve fiber ending. Each sensory cell has a sensory nerve fiber ending. Fine. Now the various types of receptors, their location and the stimuli are various types of receptors. First, you have the chromoreceptors. Now the chromoreceptors receive stimuli of chemicals, that is your taste buds. Chromoreceptors receive stimuli of chemicals. Example, taste buds. Right? Next, you have the photoreceptors. Photoreceptors receive stimuli of light. Receive stimuli of light. Example, retina of the eye. Then you have thermoreceptors. Thermoreceptors receive stimuli of temperature. Receive stimuli of temperature. Example, skin. Those are your thermoreceptors. Then you have olfactory receptors. The olfactory receptors receive stimuli of smell. Receive stimuli of smell. Example of olfactory receivers are nose. Then you have the tango receptors. Now the tango receptors receive stimuli of pressure and touch. Receive stimuli of pressure and touch. Example, skin. Right? Then you have the statoreceptors. The statoreceptors receive stimuli for balancing the body. Receive stimuli for balancing the body. Example, the semicircular canals in the internal ear. The semicircular canals in the internal ear. Then you have the phonoreceptors. The phonoreceptors receive sound waves. Example you could have is cochlea of internal ear. right? So those are my receptors. Why do I need receptors? Receptors receive stimuli from external environment through sense organ. They convert these stimuli into impulses, and then these impulses can be transmitted to the brain through sensory neurons to give a particular response. Hence, I need receptors, right? So what is the significance of receptors? Significance of receptors. They receive stimuli from external environment. They receive stimuli from external environment through sense organs. Right? Once they receive the stimuli, they convert these stimuli into impulses. These stimuli into impulses, and finally these impulses are then transmitted to the brain. These impulses are then transmitted to the brain through sensory neuron. Sensory neuron to give particular response. So those are my receptors. Finally, let us see what are effectors. The last thing that you have in this chapter are effectors. What are effectors? Effectors are generally glands or muscles which receive motor impulses to give response to the stimuli transmitted from the sensory organ. Right? They are glands and the muscles. They are glands and the muscles which receive motor impulses. Motor impulses to give response to the stimuli transmitted. Response to the stimuli transmitted from the sense organ. So those are effectors, right? That's how you define effectors. Effectors are present at the end of the motor nerve fibers. Where are they present? They are present at the end of motor nerve fibers. Fine. Now, glands are effectors which respond to the stimuli by secreting various secretions such as hormones, enzymes, mucus, etc. So what are glands? Glands are effectors which respond. Glands are effectors which respond to the stimulus. Respond to the stimulus by secreting various secretions. Right, that's one of the effectors. Muscles are effectors which respond to the stimulus by contracting or relaxing. Muscles are effectors which respond to the stimulus by contracting or relaxing. Fine. Why do I need effectors? Effectors such as muscles bring about movement of the body, right? It brings about contraction and relaxation of blood vessels. Effectors such as glands secrete your secretions which are necessary, your hormones, enzymes and mucous saliva. So that is the reason why I need effectors. Fine, did we get this thing here? Okay, we'll stop this here for the day. Thank you very much.